My name's Mike Collins and I'm from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and it's been a real privilege to be involved in the search for the UK's favourite book about nature. We asked members of the public to nominate their personal favourites, and we had hundreds and hundreds of nominations, including classic books such as Tarka the Otter, children's classics, books like the Observer Book of Nature, more recent nature writing hits like Helen Macdonald's H is for Hawk. And it's been really interesting in the discussion today in terms of what nature writing means to people and why it's grown so rapidly in the last decade or so. And I think from a personal point of view, I've fallen in love with nature again through having young children and seeing it through their eyes and through their world. Plus my work has allowed me to dip in and out of nature books, and I think UK is a real true global superpower when it comes to books about nature. This poll is all about trying to find the UK's favourite book about nature and celebrating what nature means to us and how people have captured those personal connections through writing about nature, whether it's through fiction, non-fiction, poetry or prose, that people have really captured that special relationship we have with the natural world.
My name is Miriam Darlington and I'm an author and academic based at Plymouth University, and I write about the natural world, in the environment, and particularly people's connection to wild creatures. There's been a resurgence in nature writing, particularly very recently in the last 10 years or so, and for me it's to do with a huge concern for the environment. People are seeing species disappear at a rate of knots. I used to see, growing up as a child, I used to see hundreds of swifts in the sky. Now in my town there are only 6 or 12 swifts each year come back. And whereas people of my generation might be familiar with that, younger people will see the paucity that's out there. And I think for me, this is why people are starting to pay attention to and write about wild nature, because of the concern for the losses, the huge losses of species. In the list of the nation's favourite book, the poll, have all reflected a concern for species. And among my favourites are the ones that tell a story of obsession, a passionate interest in a particular creature. And what better way is there to engender interest in wildlife than one's personal story of our connection with a particular creature? So books like Rob Cowan's Common Ground, more recently. But in 1927, one of my favourites, Tarka the Otter, was published. Now this book is particularly important to me because it engendered a huge passion and feeling of concern for the environment. And I was 9 or 10 years old when I read this book. And so I'm interested in the effects that these stories have on people when they're young, and how that lasts into their later years, how that impact will be lasting and will draw people out into the natural world.
I'm Ben Hoare, the features editor of BBC Wildlife magazine, and it's been a great honour to be part of the panel looking at some of Britain's favourite writing about nature. And we're very lucky in Britain to have some of the most powerful books that there are. With this great flourishing of writing about the natural world in this country, it's amazing. The number of books being published in a variety of books. And not only that, the power of some of these books. What's really interesting, reading the responses from people who've taken part in this poll, the number of times people talk about books changing them. These are life-changing, life-affirming books. I've been voting for or nominating in this poll are actually they were originally written for children. They're children's books, and they spark an interest, and it can be a lifelong interest in the natural world. And in my case, it actually went on and even inspired my career as well. And that seems to be a very common theme through some of the most popular nature books.
Books the panel have selected for the Landlines Britain's Favourite Nature Book project are J.A. Baker, The Peregrine, John Clare, Poems, Rob Cowan, Common Ground, Kenneth Grahame, The Wind in the Willows, Kathleen Jamie, Findings, Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morris, The Lost Words, Chris Packham, Fingers in the Sparkle Jar, Nan Shepherd, The Living Mountain, Gilbert White, The Natural History of Selborne, and Henry Williamson's Tarka the Otter.